Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And if you see me doing a pain face at the start of the replay, it has everything to do with Chuck Norris. Unfortunately, our hero for today, Mr. Big Boss, has decided to put Chuck Norris in one of the most fun tanks you can play. This is of course the T95. That pain face might also be from a couple of days ago where I released a video where I played the best tier 9 tanks in the game live, and we found out it went Tortoise and then it went T95, who were in this eternal struggle to prove who is the best tier 9 tank destroyer. Yeah, I might have accidentally driven my T95 off a bridge, and I can tell that a lot of you were disappointed that you didn't get any T95 gameplay. And while I'm not going to be making it up to you myself, because obviously I'm just terrible at the T95, and probably, for all I know, another Ladybird is going to appear and get to sabotage me once again. So instead, we have Mr. Big Boss, who sounds like the perfect kind of player to be playing in a T95, because if I was to describe a T95, it would be probably that it is a big boss of a tank. So Mr. Big Boss has decided to use two pieces of equipment that I can be fairly sure about on this tank. Number one, that he is using a turbo, and that's because his reverse speed is going over 10 kilometers an hour there. And when we saw him trundling into position, albeit only about 100 meters of driving was needed in the T95 for this game, we saw that his top speed limit went over 20 kilometers an hour. So he's clearly using a turbo. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't pairing that with a gun rammer, but as we see that Mr. Big Boss doesn't have Mr. Big hit points, it looks like he is not using the durability module on this vehicle, which is actually really nice for keeping the tracks on and being able to allow them to repair quickly. He's probably either using vents, or he's definitely not using coated optics binoculars or a camera net, otherwise we would see that the implications of that in the view range. So he's either using a rotation device on the vehicle to be able to increase the traverse speed, or alternatively he's using vents, which I think would probably be a great pick. That's the kind of build that I personally use on my Tortoise. Gun rammer, vents, and a turbo. But on my T95, I like to play it a little bit different. I don't really focus on the DPM of the vehicle. I focus on the big boy alpha damage that the tank has, and I try to maximize my mobility and try and improve the durability of my tracks to be able to prevent my opponents from locking me down. Mr. Big Boss, however, seems to be focused on mobility and DPM in this build, and he's going to put it to great effect here in the T95. And within the first 2.5 minutes of this game, Mr. Big Boss has shut down 2 tanks, put multiple rounds into tier 10 vehicles, and also plucked up 4,000 damage against the enemy team. But his team are still down by a tank and still down by 2,000 hit points, suggesting that Mr. Big Boss has a lot of work still to do. Alright, so the enemy seem to be thinking, well, surely we can take him, right? He's got 3 vehicles to the left, 2 in front of him and 1 to the right, although the VZ55 is separated with the train tracks. And Mr. Big Boss finally decides to use his repair kit to not want to get locked down by the E50. Will the enemy advance at Mr. Big Boss along this corridor? One of the things that I loved about this replay is it really shows you how good the low-profile nature of the T95 is. Usually it's awkward because it allows your opponents to shoot your weak points on top. But in this situation, it actually allowed Mr. Big Boss to shoot under the rail carts here against all of the players that were foolishly trying to make their way through the middle of the map. They probably didn't expect the T95 to be reliably clapping them. So who's Mr. Big Boss going to shoot? Is he going to shoot the Skoda? Might as well finish off the autoloader to stop them from being able to flank them. And it already looks like Mr. Big Boss has managed to complete TD Mission 2 for the Object 260. Well, at least with honors with regards to the 5,000 damage that Mr. Big Boss had to deal. And talking about scary tanks, arguably the most scary tank in the game, the Kranvang has just appeared, and what a disaster! Mr. Big Boss fails to have a big roll there against the Progetto 65, leaving them now on 31 hit points. And this, ladies and gents, is why I love the T95 and why I love T95 replays as well. They're absolutely awesome. Just the fact that you're kind of like this big behemoth just sitting there going, come at me guys, and as long as there isn't a bridge in sight, it seems like the vehicle does do pretty well, right? You can't really have this kind of feeling in any other vehicle, apart from maybe a T110E3, but that's the bigger brother of the T95, so it'd be expected. The problem with the T110E3 is it doesn't really feel like it has the side armor that the T95 has, and while it doesn't have weak points on top of the vehicle, it definitely feels as if its weak points towards the lower plate are a lot easier to hit. So, oh, come on, high roll here against the Kranvang, please. Oh, not today. But luckily, the Renegade, played by Bol, 69 in the corner, manages to shut down the Kranvang before they could get more high explosive anti-tank rounds into the top of Mr. Big Boss's tank. Now up to 7,000 damage. Mr. Big Boss is going to put a suitably big shell in through the side of the Chafu Tier 4 there. And I wonder when Mr. Big Boss is actually going to start to high roll in this game. It's been rather unfortunate the last few rolls. They could have definitely been a little bit more impactful to finish off the Progetto, to do a little bit more damage to the Char. You really, if it had rolled a little bit higher there, the Char would have now been a one-shot. But after the Renegade chips in a shell, right in that sweet spot. And Chuck Norris just doesn't be quiet, does he? Chuck Norris really doesn't shut up, which is why I originally had him in my, I think I had him in my FV4005, but even though that vehicle's got an incredibly long reload, he still ended up so annoying that I've subjected him to the Tier 10 British artillery. And he's actually quite hilarious when he's talking about the splash voice lines, which aren't really usually too much of a thing in World of Tanks for a special commander, unless you put them in artillery, right? Alright, so Mr. Big Boss now on 5 kills, up to 8,000 damage in the first 6 minutes of this game, but Mr. Big Boss is going to have to handle 4 more vehicles on the enemy team, including a VZ55 who is also on 5 kills, so is it going to be a battle of the top guns in this scenario? That E50, who managed to put the gold round in through the side of the T95 earlier to force Mr. Big Boss to use his repair kit, does exactly the same thing again, but luckily it doesn't damage Mr. Big Boss this time. This vehicle packs 305mm of frontal armor, so unless your opponents are hitting your weak points reliably, they are not dealing with you frontally. So the E50 decides to actually make a bit of a pass, and 751 hit points, one more than average. Come on, Mr. Big Boss, no low rolls, no low rolls, no low rolls. You got this, buddy, you got this. As his team are actually managing to flank the VZ55, but how long will they hold on against a Tier 10 Czechoslovakian heavy? We can only wonder, and unfortunately, wonder seems to be turning into a bit of a demise, but actually, the Skoda manages to finish off the VZ55, and Mr. Big Boss can't have big boy rolls. Only 733 now, leaving the E50 with the opportunity to be able to reload here and flank Mr. Big Boss. But Mr. Big Boss reloads just in time, and while the turbo allowed him to get a little bit further backwards, the gun rammer build on this vehicle to pump up that DPM actually allowed him to be able to get the extra shot in against the E50. Now on 8,871 damage dealt. Mr. Big Boss has to deal with a Tier 8 and a Tier 9 on the enemy team, and his Skoda's up to 704 hit points. That should enable them to take multiple hits from the CS-52 Lees, which really should be the focus right now to deal with. But unfortunately, that is a Tier 9 Chinese tank destroyer on the enemy team, which has a Tier 10 tank destroyer gun, and it shuts down the Skoda in a single shell. This is a nightmare scenario. If that WZ 111 GFT is firing high explosive anti-tank rounds, they're pretty much with their 95mm of penetration going to go through all of the T95's frontal armor. However, if he's firing AP, there's a bit more of a chance that the superstructure will hold up on this tank, but it's really about trying to hide those weak points. So this is the nightmare scenario for the T95. Mr. Big Boss has been spotted out, which now will allow the pair on the enemy team to start to advance towards him. And here comes the WZ-111 GFT. Mr. Big Boss puts a round right in through the side, tracking them in place. And now it's just about trying to keep your weak points moving. Wiggle, 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 wiggle as quickly. Called it, boys and girls. The high explosive anti-tank round goes right through the front of the T95, and Mr. Big Boss lets out a big no. I can imagine it was pretty much a Darth Vader kind of moment there, or even a Darth Vader kind of moment there for the T95. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there as well were not expecting that one, as unfortunately not even 9,694 damage dealt in a just about 9-minute game was enough to be able to get Mr. Big Boss the victory that frankly he deserved. Nevertheless, with a Top Gun also to his name and 1,192 base experience for the losing team, to put that into perspective, with the courageous resistance added on top, that was 1,000 833 base experience. In fact, Mr. Big Boss nearly got as much base experience as the VZ55 did on the enemy team for doing 6,000 damage and getting 6 kills in this round. That is how hard Mr. Big Boss was carrying. And the beautiful thing about the T95, with statistics like these, if you aim well and you use the correct equipment on the tank and you just keep that gun forwards and try and hold on for dear life and stop your opponents from being able to flank you. And my biggest tip in this tank would be to take the reinforced suspension to be able to massively increase your traverse speed and improve your track health to a point where it's very hard to get them off with a single shot. Then that is undoubtedly why the T95 has been dominating so hard and why it is still a fan favorite in World of Tanks. Definitely wasn't my favorite vehicle back in the day when it was only limited to 13 kilometers an hour. But now, with the bounty turbo on this thing, that you can bomb it around at 25 kilometers an hour, is it even really a slow tank? Anyway, Mr. Big Boss, my condolences for not being able to get through this game. You totally deserved it. Doing nearly 10,000 damage in a T95 in a tier 10 game, destroying most of the enemy's top tier tanks and falling at the final hurdle because the Chinese tank destroyer loaded gold against you. That's a hard one to take. But still, congratulations to you on a mammoth game for the T95, and thank you so much for uploading it on the What Replays website for the community to enjoy. I certainly did. I hope all of you out there enjoyed this video as well, and I hope it made up a little bit for the Ladybird incident. If it did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, however, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, later on today there will be a tech tree showcase for the Progetto M40 Mod 65. And so if you've ever wanted to know everything there is to know about the Italian auto-reloading medium tanks, then swing by on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby and I'll let you know whether they're still relevant in 2022. So really looking forward to seeing you all live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.